Hey guys, welcome back to the Diet Doc Life Mastery Podcast. I'm here with Dr. Kori Propst. We're still going to continue in our series on meditation. And Kori and I were chatting a little bit, and we know that a lot of people are drawn to meditative practices, especially as of late. A lot of media people are talking about it more and more. But there are so many physiological effects, so many reasons that a long-term consistent practice is where the money is. That's where the real benefit comes from. But of course there are segues into meditation, different forms. People probably are drawn to it, like you said, Kori, due to the psychological reasons. They want some kind of stress relief. They want some better clarity. So today we're going to talk a little bit about all of the benefits, but we're gonna segue into some of those that are a little bit deeper and more fundamental to our health.
Yeah.
And Kori, being the health psychologist, is probably going to carry the load here.
Well, thanks, Joe. I think it's really interesting when I listen to podcasts of interviews with individuals who they've been long-term in the meditation world, coming from all different sort of views of meditation or paths of meditation. Because like you said, there are a lot of different kinds. And if we just get back to kind of the foundation, it's mindfulness, which is this non-judgmental awareness. That's like number one, what meditation is helping us cultivate, right? A non-judgmental awareness. So we're literally training our attention. But all of these individuals, when asked, how did you come to meditation? Why did you even start? Most of them will say something like, I was suffering. I was having a really difficult time psychologically. I was experiencing a lot of stress, and I kept thinking there has to be a better way to do this. And I can't necessarily change my circumstances and the situation of my life and what's going on around me, but there has to be a better way to be responding to the conditions and the circumstances. So, yeah. I know that I came to my practice I was just really interested in what was going on in my brain and how it changes the mind and my response to life. But I recently, and I think I've mentioned before that when I sit in my practice, there's nothing special that happens. It's not like I have these amazing aha moments when I'm on the cushion or sitting in a chair or wherever it is that I'm, choosing to practice. But when I was sitting last week, and I practice a breath awareness technique, so my focus is on the feeling of the breath in my body. And it's not about stopping all my thoughts and clearing my mind. It's because the mind thinks, right? We have 68,000 thoughts per day, and most of them are negative. That's what the mind does. But in this breath awareness technique, when I notice I'm getting swept away by a thought, it's the noticing that tells me that I'm doing it right. And meditation isn't about striving and, forcing my mind to be a certain way. It's a gentle and kind of compassionate technique to kind of redirect again and again. But my mind had this thought, and it went something like this. You're 40 effing years old, Kori. And there was the cuss word in there, in the thought. At what point do you choose to stop acting like a baby? Clingy, needy, thinking that especially the primary male person in your life needs to provide you with love all the time and nurturing and care and fix this emptiness inside of you.
It's a pretty deep thought.
Oh, yeah. that was one where I'm like, in the meditation, I'm like, I don't really want to let that go. Because the practice is notice, label it as thinking, gently let go, and come back to the breath. I did, but the next thought was, I need to remember that. I need to remember that. I need to remember that. I don't have a journal next to me or anything because that's not the practice. But that's what came up for me. And, post breakfast, I take out my journal because I have a meditation journal where I just sort of reflect and relax into and see if I can recall what occurred, what if anything I noticed, and that's what I recalled. And it's had a noticeable impact on my perception of how I am with my partner. Who I want to be in the relationship. And it's, I know this is completely coincidental, but, when your attention is on something in a much bigger way, you start to notice other things that relate to it, right? So I'm reading this book by Sharon Salzberg called Real Love, and I get to the relationship chapter, and it's all about you being your own sense of refuge in a relationship, and that you are responsible for your own sense of wholeness. And this is not what the book said and what Sharon said, and you and I have actually had conversations about this, Joe, where we've said it's not even fair or realistic to put our partners in a position to where they have to fill that hole or that loneliness or solve the problems or the traumas of our pasts and what our needs are.
See, now you're getting to my favorite form of meditation, because even though I understand breath awareness and being quiet is a goal for some and a need, I mean, that is definitely part of the health benefits is to become so aware of your own thinking that you can decide what to pay attention to, what to push away. But for me, first of all, I don't know if I could ever even get to that point, because my brain, is flying in a lot of directions at pretty high speeds a lot of the time. So just to sit down to meditate, it is almost that reflective nature of, okay, I'm just going to sit here and think and be alone with my thoughts without the distractions. I mean, most of the day I'm walking around with this, playing podcasts or YouTube videos that are very academic. And, I think we're all now so addicted to information going in, even if we're not doing it just to distract ourselves, that is the effect. I mean, we now spend very little time just thinking. And so I often, Kori, as you did, have some kind of a stark realization. And then in that quiet time of meditating, whatever you're doing, as you said, in, sitting, laying down, it can be a time to I want to say, almost have a self-therapy session to think through things. So that is not, I know, the number one way to quiet yourself, but it's part of a type of meditation.
It is. And man, there are so many different names for the types of meditation, but what's coming to mind for me is open awareness. There is a practice of sitting and not necessarily, what's funny is that there's always some sort of a focus. In every type, there's some sort of, there's a directedness. But an open awareness, as opposed to a breath awareness, you're noticing just whatever is present for you in that moment, whether it's a thought, whether it's a feeling in the body, you notice it. oh, okay. And there's this sense of, okay, I'm gonna let that flow by and then let the next thing come in. But that's very different than redirect to the breath and the sensation of the breath and redirect to the breath. And yeah.
And I think everybody, based on personality and maybe the kind of information you're letting guide your meditative practice, comes to different pathways. But, I in my brain right now keep coming back to the fact that if you did not have this practice, this schedule of doing this, you would have missed this opportunity perhaps to change yourself, your relationship, and your entire future in a positive way. You just would keep responding, reacting, maybe becoming frustrated. And here in this moment of really profound, quiet clarity, you might be uncovering a pretty freaking big, thing to work on that just has profound impact.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. And not just for me, but for us as a couple, and for him being the person that he is and not feeling pressured to be anyone else. That's not who I don't want to be the person pressuring him to change. That
So let's talk for a second about the physiological benefit of dealing with that kind of realization the way you did. You could be in a moment with him, maybe in already a moment of frustration, and you could have a very different reaction to the fact that you did this in a quiet, reflective space, and that probably has a major, major influence on how you will now deal with that information.
So I have for a long time, Joe, had the intention of softening. That's a very important word for me, to soften, to drop the wall. Because I can put up a big freaking wall and I can get pretty defensive. And so softening has been really important to me. But it means something different to me now since that moment sitting on my cushion. And I can notice it faster now if I start to feel that elevated level of intensity in my body. And I've always had the capacity to like my body just begins breathing when it starts to feel that amplification of that stress response begin. Did you know that it takes 2 minutes for that stress response to play out, where then your adrenal glands are releasing epinephrine and norepinephrine and adrenaline? 2 minutes. That's a long time. So I see the practice of meditation being incredibly relevant in that regard, to where we get really in touch with, because it's creating a new level of awareness about what's going on up here, in here. It's actually a work in. We work out all the time, and that's creating stress. Meditation is working inwardly. It's not designed to create stress. And it actually has been shown to relieve it, for these reasons, because we can notice the response faster and then change how we act with it. What if we're going to believe the thought and have the perception and tell the story that gets us even more defensive and galvanized? But so there's an emotion regulation piece to it that increases with increased practice. And with that, if we're decreasing stress, Joe, then we're actually enhancing the immune system as well, right? And that's been shown in many studies, is that the immune system is enhanced with increased practice of meditation. You've talked about instances where you've felt your heart beating in your throat, and you could literally hear it in your head. Your blood pressure is just off the charts. Meditation practice also has an impact on cardiovascular health through the decrease of blood pressure. And then, we know that someone who is in a state of chronic stress also has increased systemic inflammation within their bodies. And so the practice of meditation also has been shown to reduce inflammation in the body as well.
Yeah, and I think as we continue this series, I know for me, at least, everybody seems to be more interested in, finding something that can stick and hold our interest. And that's something that I think we're going to talk about maybe in the next podcast is, okay, here are some different forms to try. If this is your personality, at least do this, because those long-term benefits you're describing are just not going to happen unless you can make this a part of your daily life. And I would propose, and looking forward to your answer to this in the next podcast, that regardless of how you start, it creates a mindfulness that goes well beyond just that session. So it's not that, okay, I got my 5 or 10 minutes or hour of meditation.
Check it off the list like everything else.
But it links you back to that psychologically through the day, and the more consistency you have over time, it just almost becomes a way of life. It really does change how you interact in many, many ways. But you got to have that anchor point where you're actually doing the practice.
The anchor, and I love that word because to me, there's a groundedness that comes with a consistent practice. And that doesn't mean you have to practice 2 hours a day to get benefits. No, I practice 10 to 15 minutes a day, sometimes longer, not usually, to be real honest. But it is, I unfortunately think that a lot of people go into it with this quick fix mentality, like everything else. You know what? This is a panacea. It's a cure-all for whatever we're experiencing. And it's not that. It isn't. There are so many things that we can do to enhance our health and well-being. And it's not for everyone either. Like, I'm never going to be a power lifter. I'm not interested in it. I don't want this podcast to come off as you should be meditating. It's not about that. This is just about informing people about what is out there and what has been shown to be incredibly beneficial. But start with 1 minute a day.
Excellent.
Yeah.
All right. So I know we're going to continue for at least a couple more podcasts on this, and we're going to get into the how-tos and the forms. So appreciate all that good insight, Kori, and we will catch you guys next time.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, guys.